Well, this is Dateline News and Conversation. Not going to waste any time tonight. My guest, my good friend, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri, welcome back to the show.
Always great to talk to you, Regis. Thank you for having me.
Okay, you have been jet setting all over half of this continent. You've been to Colombia, Venezuela. Prior to that, you've been to the Middle East on several occasions, to Gaza, to Tehran. I don't want to talk about that tonight, Dimitri, because I don't want to minimize the importance. But what's on everybody's mind now, and you've been reporting on this extensively, are the Epstein Files and Netanyahu's, whatever it was, fifth visit in 1 year to visit Trump in the White House. And I want to discuss both of these things with you. But Dimitri, you've been posting what you've discovered in analyzing over 1,000 photographs from the Epstein Files of Epstein's mansion, I guess on the Upper East Side of New York. I want you to tell me about how you acquired these. And basically, I know what your conclusion was, but I want to share that with the people who are viewing this video tonight. It's horrific. It is, there's only one word I can use, and it's satanic. Dimitri, tell me about how and why you decided to spend so much time investigating and analyzing these Epstein photographs and files.
Well, I've long believed, Regis, that the main reason why we confront so many crises in the world today and why certain Western societies are arguably on the verge of collapse is because of the depravity of the elite. The problems start at the top. And unless and until we understand the sheer evil of the people who rule us and divest them of their power, which is obviously a Herculean task, we're going to continue down this disastrous path that we're on. And there's no scandal that has unfolded in my lifetime that I think reveals to a comparable degree the level of depravity and barbarism of the Western elites than the Epstein scandal. And if we can get to the bottom of what happened, or even close to the bottom of what actually happened in Epstein's world of pedophilia and who was involved in it, and if we can communicate to enough of our fellow citizens across the West what these people have done, what they've gotten away with for all these years, then finally we may muster the collective will to remove them from power by any and all means necessary, preferably by peaceful means. So I think that's what makes this story so vitally important. And there's now so much material to work with. It's not just that the story is important, but the task of unraveling all of this is huge, because these documents, they number in the millions. They're very complex. There's very little explanation being offered by the Department of Justice, and I think this is intentional, about what it's disclosed. It's not giving us context. It's not organizing the documents in a way that makes it easy to connect the pieces. And so this requires a tremendous amount of intellectual labor. And I'm just one of many people who is embarked upon this task of trying to make sense of these documents. I couldn't possibly do it alone. We need an army of researchers and analysts working together to unlock the diabolical secrets of this cabal. And so when it comes to the photographs I've been reviewing, if you go to the DOJ's website, they call it the Epstein Files Library. They have organized these documents by what they call data sets, and they've given each of them a number, a sequential number, but they don't tell you what's in the data set, right? So you just plunge in and start, opening documents. And so I started with data set number 1. not knowing what was in data set number one. It turns out that data set number one is a body of about 3,800 photos. I'm up to, I think, 2,100. And the first 1,500 photos in this database were of Jeffrey Epstein's New York mansion, which was sold in 2021 by his estate. But he lived in that mansion basically from 1998 until his arrest, his final arrest in mid-2019. And it's a massive mansion. It's got 42 rooms. It's got 21,000 square feet, 7 floors. And because of the size of it and the amount of time he lived in it and the number of people, I mean, this is New York City, right? So a lot of billionaires either have property in New York City or come frequently to New York City. So this place was frequented by almost all of the powerful people who were associates of Jeffrey Epstein at one point or another. So it's a wealth of information. So I've gone through the first 1,500 photographs. And then when I got to photograph 1,500, I realized that what I was looking at was no longer Jeffrey Epstein's mansion, but his palatial residence on St. James Island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which has come to be known as Epstein Island. And that is where, for obvious reasons, I think some of the worst depravities took place. When I say obvious, I mean, this island is isolated. You could come in on helicopter. So it was much easier to do things without being detected there than it might be, for example, in New York City mansion, because New York is, there are cameras everywhere in New York, photographers everywhere, people trying to follow what famous people are doing. You could get away with a lot more in Epstein Island. So I've gone through the first, I think, 700 photos of Epstein Island. There's quite a few more to go. And if you'd like, I can summarize for you sort of my main findings and impressions from this body of photographs that I reviewed. But I leave that to you.
No, I want you to do that, but I want to clarify something. The first batch of photographs that you shared on a show a few days ago, not weeks, a few days ago, focused primarily on his mansion in New York City. Are you saying now that you have viewed photographs of what's happened on his island, Epstein Island?
Well, I've viewed photographs of his. So to be very precise, what happened here is that about 4 days after Epstein was arrested in the United States, the FBI conducted a massive search of his New York mansion. Okay. And when they went into the house, an FBI photographer took multiple photographs from multiple angles of every single room in the house. They even numbered the rooms. Okay. Then on 8/12/2019, now it's not clear to me if that's August 12th or if it's December 8th. Okay. They did the same thing with Epstein Island. Okay. They conducted a search of the entire thing and they took multiple photographs, multiple angles of every single room. Now, when they did this, there was nobody in the house. So you say what happened, what they were getting was a snapshot in time of what the house looked like and its contents looked like, but there was nobody in the house. Mm-hmm. At least no one appears in any of these photos. And I just want to point out the reason why I mentioned the dates is because as a lawyer, I am deeply troubled by the fact that the FBI did not immediately search these premises and photograph these premises when they arrested Jeffrey Epstein. Why? Because once they arrested Jeffrey Epstein, it would be a matter of minutes, perhaps hours, before all of his associates, all of his conspirators knew he had been arrested. So if you let time go by from the moment that they learn of this to the time you conduct a search, conspirators, co-conspirators, or associates of his might be able to get into the premises and sanitize them and remove from them incriminating evidence. Okay. Why these idiots or scoundrels, I don't know which, waited until, at the earliest they conducted a search of Epstein Island was August 12th. But depending upon what that date means, they might have even waited until December. But even if it was August 12th, they gave, his co-conspirators and his associates a full month from the time they arrested him to go into Epstein Island and remove incriminating evidence. So this is inexcusable in my view. But in any event, there still was a lot of deeply disturbing imagery in that database.
All right. Share with us some of the disturbing imagery. And I have one big question I think everybody in the United States and maybe the world wants to know. Is Donald Trump implicated, photographed? I've seen photographs of Trump and videos of Trump all over the internet. A couple of people on X keep showing videos and pictures of Trump with underage girls in really not naked or sexual, but compromising positions. Tell me about what you've seen and what it really means.
Well, in the New York mansion, there are photographs all over the place of Epstein with either he's with them or they are photographed alone of women and females who are at most in their late teens, very early 20s. And a number of these photos, a significant proportion of them, it's absolutely crystal clear, even though the faces are redacted, that these are children. Absolutely crystal clear. And they're all over his mansion. So, they come, sometimes they're huge photographs that have been affixed to walls. Sometimes they're mid-sized photographs. Sometimes they're, little frame photographs on his desk or on some credenza. Then you find paintings of various sizes where the FBI has redacted the faces. You can tell they're paintings, but the FBI has redacted the faces, which means, in my view, the most logical inference is because the faces of the paintings are redacted, that not only did Epstein photograph or have professionals photograph his victims, but they were also being painted by painters who were engaged by Epstein. And these things are all over the house. And then there are some cases where there are sculptures. There was this one just perverted little sculpture of two teenage girls engaged in, they were clothed, but they were clearly engaged in sexual, intimacy, which was sitting on a credenza. And then there's this wacko sculpture of a young female with a bridal gown suspended by a rope in the main foyer. So when you came in to the entrance to the house, you would see this. It was impossible to miss it. And anybody entering the house just right then and there would have been, because you're dealing with a pedophile. If this is posted, who's out 2008, he's been convicted, right? So you walk in and you see this image that should immediately put you on notice that you're dealing with a man who's not been rehabilitated. There's not a man who has any there's no indication of any remorse in the photographs I saw. If anything, what the photographs show is that Jeffrey Epstein flaunted in his homes his ongoing obsession with female children. That's what he did. He flaunted it. So anybody who went into that house and spent any amount of time in it would know that Jeffrey Epstein continued to have an obsession, a depraved obsession with female minors, and that he was flaunting it. And so all of those people who protest, this is, to me, the main thing that I took away from this thus far. And I've still got another, I think, 1,500 photos to review. The main thing I take away from this is that every single person who dined with Epstein, stayed at Epstein's house, got massages at Epstein's house, and who says, I was deceived and I didn't know, they're lying through their teeth. They know that Jeffrey Epstein had a sick obsession with female minors, some of them under 10 years old. They couldn't have missed this, and they continued to do business with him and socialize with him anyways. So I say, a pox on the house of every single person who ever socialized with Epstein at any one of his homes in the period after 2008. And it was probably, his house had this kind of evidence in it going all the way back to the 80s or 90s. I can't prove that, but I would suspect that that's the case.
Wow.
And by the way, I didn't mention there are also some signs, although I'm not so sure about this. There are signs that this man had some kind of preoccupation with the occult. But we have to, with Satanism, but that's something that I think needs to be investigated further.
I want to talk about that a little bit later. Okay. These photographs reveal this man's obsession with children, young girls, young women, thousands of photographs. As you mentioned, he was just flouting this obsession of his. And, I haven't delved into this like you have, but I've read reports that some of the most powerful people have stayed in his mansion, some for several days, but many have dined there. Dimitri, I still want to know, Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump was best friends with him for, people say, as many as 10 years. And then I guess when he got involved in politics, he said, no, I'm not involved with him anymore. But Jeffrey Epstein has been quoted, you've read it, I've read it, as the most depraved person, a person without any values, without any decency. What can you tell me about Donald Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and mm-hmm. about the videos and photographs that are appearing all over social media of Trump in compromising positions with young women, young girls?
Well, let's start with the photographs I reviewed. One thing that really stuck out for me, Regis, is that there's not a single photograph thus far. I've looked at 2,300, I think, photographs, 1,500 of the mansion, 800 of Epstein Island. Not a single photograph of Donald Trump. You can see there's this huge painting in the mansion of, it's the most perverted thing, of Bill Clinton reclining in a chair in this spectacular dress, wearing high heels. And, the reports I've seen is that dress was intended to depict the dress that Monica Lewinsky was wearing when she performed a sexual act on the former president in the White House. And he's got this kind of lascivious look on his face in this painting. There are photographs in his house, his New York mansion, of Steve Bannon, Woody Allen. There's this photograph of him with his arm wrapped around the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. You could tell they had quite a friendship. And numerous other people, famous people you can find in these photographs, but not a single photograph of Trump. Now, there's no way, in my opinion, that man didn't have photographs of him and Trump somewhere in his house. They're being withheld. I think that's a very reasonable assumption. The DOJ has been directed to withhold that photographic evidence, but there's still a ton of evidence out there. There's a sworn statement in this file, this dump of documents. We don't know who the affiant is because her actual name is not disclosed, but she claims that in a sworn statement that Trump raped her when she was 13, and that Trump threatened her if she revealed what he had done, with violence and possibly death. And there's plenty of indications like that. People have come out and said that Trump did that. We know that he had parties with Epstein in Florida, where the two of them alone were alone with very young females in Epstein's residence. We know that it was through Epstein that Trump met Melania. We know that that Epstein was recruiting females, some of them minors, from Trump's estate, Mar-a-Lago, where he was spending time. He would find women there, young women or or minors, and eventually ensnare them in his pedophilia operation. So We also know that Donald Trump has absolutely no regard for human life, that for the last 13 months, he has been aiding and abetting Israel in every imaginable way, as it has been mass murdering children in Gaza, starving them to death. That the Israeli regime, with Trump's enthusiastic support, has been torturing minors. So when I add it all up here, I can't tell you that I can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, but in my own mind, I don't have any reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed pedophilia. I would be absolutely astonished if this man, having had with knowing what we know about him, knowing what we know about young women and minors who interacted with him, knowing what we know about his relationship with Epstein, I would be astonished if Donald Trump was not a pedophile. Absolutely amazed. There's no doubt in my mind he's a pedophile. But again, I can't tell you that I could go into a court of law and prove it to the satisfaction of a judge at this stage. But if we get all the evidence, I'm very, very confident that that's exactly what it's going to show.
Wow. I agree with you. I think the Department of Justice, under this Pam Bondi and this Kash Patel guy, oh my God! First of all, they say there's tons of evidence. We've read it all, and then they said there's nothing here, and then they start, after Congress demands that they release this, and that they've redacted most of it. It's like, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not stupid. I look at that activity and I say, this is a massive cover-up. They are protecting a whole network of people, I believe, not only in the world of finance, big-time finance, but in the world of United States government, the Congress, maybe even, the Supreme Court. It sure does look, it stinks. It stinks of evil and massive corruption and cover-up, at all levels. You mentioned Bill Clinton. He and his wife, I guess, from what I read here, and I'm in Russia, so I get reports not from the New York Times or Washington Post and CNN, but, basically from some Russian media, that the two Clintons were called before that subcommittee in Congress, and they said that they were not going to testify unless the cameras were on and this was televised to the American people. What can you say about that? And if it's true, what does it mean from your perspective as an attorney?
Well, are you asking me what I anticipate their testimony is going to be?
No, what their move was to say that we're not going to testify unless it's public and live to the American people, which to me implied they were going to expose a whole lot of people. I don't know.
That's possible interpretation, but another interpretation is that they viewed it as an opportunity to try to exonerate themselves, and they weren't going to go through the exercise unless they could provide their spin directly to the American people. So I don't know what to make of that. Regis, what I would say is I think it's highly likely that some kind of deal was struck. That's why they changed their tune. So there was some kind of agreement about the scope and nature of the questioning to which they would be subjected, and there was an agreement as to certain subjects being off limits. And at that point, they said, "Okay, we can safely participate in this fiasco." I suspect that's what's going on here, but I'd love to be surprised and to find out that they had a come to Jesus moment after they initially said they wouldn't take part and decided they're going to tell all. I'd be shocked if they do that. I really would.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, what's happening. But I want to get back to something else, and I want your take on it, because I've formed an opinion, but everything is focused on Jeffrey Epstein right now. And I want to know if you think that, I'm going to put it this way, is he the nucleus, like of an atom, around which everything else is happening worldwide in terms of pedophilia, satanic rituals, sacrificing of children, the pedophilia? Or do you think that Jeffrey Epstein is not the nucleus? He's just an operative in this gigantic web that right now looks like it encompasses the United States and probably a lot or most of Europe. What are your thoughts?
I tend to the latter view. I think that the very powerful people who are participants in this psychotic cabal and network want us to believe that Jeffrey Epstein made it all happen, and that this is his thing, and that without him it wouldn't have happened. So that we focus all of our attention on Epstein and as little as possible, if any, on the far more powerful people who were involved with him. I mean, the idea, that, for example, Epstein had more power than Bill Gates or Elon Musk, two of the many multi-billionaires who were friends of Epstein. I find that laughable. I mean, Epstein was reported to have had, at the time of his death, assets worth about $500 to $600 million. The man wasn't even a billionaire. Whereas, Elon Musk and Bill Gates are two of the very richest people in the world, possessing, tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. Money talks, man. You have that kind of money, you're going to be a lot more powerful than somebody who has, a net worth of 500 to 600 million, and who isn't even, an elected official, doesn't even have the powers of the state to wield. Epstein was a con man. He was a middleman. He greased the palms of a lot of people. He connected a lot of people. But was Epstein the most powerful actor in this network? Not even close. Not even close. And I think this network existed long before Epstein came along. And I think it has continued to function, is very likely continues to function, and will for many years until we finally put all of these perps in jail.
That's pretty much what I believe. I think this network has existed for maybe many hundreds of years. This is not new. Pedophilia, child sacrifice, you can go back thousands of years. And these things have happened. You had Sodom and Gomorrah. Whether you want to say that that's just a myth, a story that was made up, or what the meaning of it was, but supposedly God saw this evil and decided to do away with it, eradicate it. So whether or not people are expecting God to come back and eradicate all of this, like what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, the point that I'm trying to make is I think this kind of satanic ritual and child sacrifice has been around for a long, long time. And it's primarily been with very powerful people. Now, I want to ask you about Jeffrey Epstein's connection to MI6 and to Israel. And that's going to lead me to two things that I've read, all speculation, why Bibi got on that plane and raced back to Washington at this particular time. There were two things that people have speculated was on Bibi's mind. Number one was to get Trump to agree to attack Iran. But number two, how to deal with the Epstein revelations and the connections with Israel. Mm-hmm. Has this been on your radar?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, Ehud Barak stayed repeatedly, sometimes with his wife, at Epstein's New York mansion. He visited Epstein on Epstein Island. There's an email where Epstein refers to a coming visit of Ehud and Herzog, which I believe is likely to be a reference to the current Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, coming to Epstein Island. As I mentioned, Yoni Koren, who at the time, this is back 2012, 2013, was a senior Israeli intelligence official, stayed for weeks at a time on at least 3 occasions at Epstein's New York mansion, where there was all this, obvious evidence of Epstein's pedophilia. We know that from the Epstein files that Epstein was trying to perform tasks that were very important to the state of Israel, like obtaining cyber weapons for Israel. And also he was trying to orchestrate a meeting between Ehud Barak, who at that time was, I think he was either the prime minister of Israel or he was a senior military intelligence officer, and Vladimir Putin. And the purpose of him doing that was that the Israelis were trying to work out some kind of an arrangement with the Russian government that would see the departure of Bashar al-Assad from the leadership of Syria. So it was clear that he was trying to perform tasks that were very important to the state of Israel, and that he had relations with people at the highest level of the Israeli government. And you also see, for example, one of the photos from the Epstein mansion is of a T-shirt of the IDF, the Israeli military. And you see photographs of Epstein wearing this T-shirt. Epstein talks all the time about Israel in his emails. Israel was a great preoccupation of his. So if you're the Israeli leadership and you looking at the current situation and these documents being released to the public, and you know that you're already regarded as an international leper because you've been committing genocide before the eyes of the world for over 2 years and are basically, running around all of West Asia, mass murdering people and blowing things up, whether it be in Lebanon or in Iran or in Iraq or Yemen. They wiped out the entire government of Yemen, the cabinet of the Yemeni government. I mean, these people, their name is mud, and the little credibility that they have left resides primarily amongst the right, the religious right in particular, in the United States. And even there are plenty of indications that support for Israel is eroding. And, a hatred of pedophilia is bipartisan, Regis, right? You don't have to be left wing or right wing to hate pedophiles. So this has the potential to eviscerate the dwindling support for Israel, even amongst Republicans. So I think the rational expectation in these circumstances would be that the Israeli political elite is alarmed, that they're panicking, that they absolutely are horrified by what further disclosures of Epstein's connections to Israel might do to Israel's declining standing amongst American Republicans. So what happened here in the last few days is very similar to what happened in December. It's something I pointed out in my program. What happened in late last year is in November, on November 19th, under great pressure from the Congress, Trump signs into law the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which required all of the files to be disclosed by December 21st. They haven't been, not even close, but even with the latest document dump. But that's what the law said, okay? So then on December 12th, Netanyahu announces he's going back to Washington at the end of December, which just happens to be about a week after the deadline for disclosing the Epstein files. On the day before the Epstein files were to be released, so this would be December 20th, there's this big story by NBC News citing 5 anonymous sources that the reason why Netanyahu's coming to Washington is to present to Trump his plans for attacking Iran. And then the documents come out on December 21st, the first dump of documents. And from that moment to the time Netanyahu shows up in Washington at the end of December, all that people are talking about in the media, particularly the alternative media, but also the corporate media, is the Epstein files. And it's looking bad for Israel. So Netanyahu comes to Washington at the end of December, meets with Trump. What happens after he returns to Israel. He leaves the United States at the beginning of January. All hell breaks loose all over the world. And it's all, the source of it is Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, and the CIA and the Mossad together are, fomenting riots or helping to foment riots in Iran. On January 3rd, Trump sends special forces into Caracas and kidnaps the Venezuelan president. ICE agents sent into Minnesota start shooting people in the face, in the first 2 weeks of January. Trump starts talking about how he's going to confiscate Greenland. And for a good 10 days, the corporate media were obsessed with whether Trump was going to use military force or impose tariffs on Europe for the purpose of confiscating Greenland. And Epstein disappears from the public discourse throughout the month of January. It was just like somebody snapped their fingers and everybody stopped talking about it. Then we come to January 30th, and the Trump administration now releases over 3 million pages of Epstein documents, not because they wanted to, because they had to. That's what the law that Trump was forced to sign. He wouldn't have been able to sustain a veto because almost everybody in Congress supported the law. That's the only reason he signed it. He didn't want to look like he was being forced to do it. What happens on January 30th after those documents come out, which are much worse than the documents disclosed on December 21st? Everybody starts talking about the Epstein Files again. And a big part of the conversation is about Israel's connections to Epstein. And then, boom, 3 days after those documents come out, Netanyahu says he's coming to Washington again. And he's coming sooner than he had planned. And the reason we're told, again, is that he's going to talk to Trump about Iran. And so I think there's a bit of a pattern here. And the pattern is whenever there's a document dump that makes Israel look bad, Netanyahu is rushing on an urgent basis to Washington and telling people that the reason he's coming is Iran. Now, I want to be very clear. I have no doubt they're talking about Iran. I have no doubt they talked about Iran in late December. I have no doubt that they're talking about Iran this week, and that may be even a big part of their agenda. But don't tell me that they're not talking about the Epstein Files too. That's ridiculous. I mean, you have to be either treating us like idiots by pretending that Netanyahu's urgent visits to Washington in late December and this week have nothing to do with the release of the Epstein Files. This is existential for Israel. U.S. support for Israel is the difference between Israel existing and Israel being wiped off the face of the earth.
I'm glad that you connected the dots and the tactics that they've used to distract us from the Epstein Files. I absolutely agree with you 100%. I think that the information in those files is so damaging to this. I hate to call them elite, but they're global entities, global forces. When you say elite, it makes it sound like they're better than we are. They're not. They're evil. And so I really think that this network of very powerful people, and I question sometimes if there really are people or there's some kind of hybrids, are really threatened. The network is being exposed in broad daylight. Now, Dimitri, I said, I don't know, when this Epstein stuff came out and Trump was sort of implicated, that this little Epstein thorn is not going away. And what we're seeing right now is this is like a boil on the back of your neck that just burst. It's like a volcano. And it's impossible, I believe, to hide anymore because everybody sees the depravity of it. I have to think that people in the United States are looking at two things, if they're looking at anything. One, the corruption in the government, and a government that doesn't represent them, from the Congress to the presidency to the Supreme Court. And number two, this Epstein thing that's not going away. And I want to ask you this. Do you think that people are beginning to understand how Epstein and this network has used to control people and to gain power because of what they know about them, how they've involved them in pedophilia, in satanic rituals of all kinds? Do you think this is going on? Do you think American people might be opening their eyes to what's really happening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, let's look at just two very prominent examples. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson were, committed Republicans who were huge fans, using their large platforms to promote Donald Trump and MAGA for years. And anybody who watches them now and listens to what they have to say can only come to one conclusion, and that is they have had a dramatic awakening. Now, I'm not saying that they've become left-wing. They still identify as being on the right. They still very much identify as being conservatives. But man, they have turned against Donald Trump and his inner circle in a big way. And they are using their very large platforms. Millions of people, each of them, watch them on a regular basis. And most of those people, by all indications, lean to the right, which is where, as I said, Israel's dwindling support largely remains. And so just looking at that, there are others who supported Trump, like did the comedian Dave Smith, another person with a large platform, who has become very critical of Donald Trump, effectively has almost apologized for having supported Trump in the last election. So when you have these major figures with these large platforms, coming out and declaring openly on a daily basis that they can no longer support Donald Trump. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene also, right? Who was a big promoter of Donald Trump in the United States Congress up until recently, and now just eviscerates him. She recently did an interview in which she explained, after resigning from the Congress, that the final blow for her, it's an extraordinary account that she gives, was that Donald Trump called her up after she had made a public appearance with a number of Epstein victims and called for the documents to be released, and blasted her because the release of these documents were going to compromise his friends. That's what he said. And she said in this interview, she had him on the speakerphone and that everybody in her office heard the conversation. And she said, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, that he was saying that we have to hide the evidence of what was done to these women in order to protect his powerful and wealthy friends. And he just said it straight up. So there is obviously an awakening happening. And the real question is, how broad will this awakening be? Is right now, I don't think the majority of the population in the United States has gotten the memo. There's a lot of serious questions being asked. A lot of people are concerned. I don't yet see evidence that the majority of the American population fully grasps the extent of this scandal, because if they had, I think you'd be seeing massive protests in the streets. People out there en masse demanding that Donald Trump resign, that all of these characters be turfed out of office. We're not seeing that yet. So that's why personally I spend so much time, Regis, working on this story. I'm not being paid to do this. I do this because I feel that we need to get to that point. That's the only way we can save ourselves from these scoundrels and criminals.
It's from where I'm sitting, half a world away. It's hard to believe what's happening in the United States and across the West. It's interesting, Dimitri. What's happening is not really on the minds of ordinary Russian people. They're not focusing on this. However, Vladimir Putin said last year that their vampire ball is over. And just the other day, Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, the longest standing foreign minister in the world, he came out and actually use the words satanic rituals and child sacrifice, and that time is over. Now, this is the president of the Russian Federation and the foreign minister speaking out on what they are seeing unfolding in the United States and across the West. And they're going, that's not happening here. And I wonder what your take is on how Russia and China are viewing all of this that's unfolding, because nobody's really talking about that. Everybody is looking at, okay, this is what's happening. It's a trade war, an economic war between the United States and China, between the United States and Russia, the United States and India. But nobody's talking about this network of powerful people that are connected to everything you and I have just been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm curious about is, like, there's a lot of discussion in these documents about Russian women being recruited by the Epstein network to be trafficked to these powerful men. And you probably know this better than I do. I would imagine that there are a lot of people in Russia who are outraged by this, that these Western predators, sexual predators, were coming to Russia and other countries in Eastern Europe and basically, recruiting unsuspecting, vulnerable females, a number of them minors, into this depraved pedophile ring. But I think we can say with a high level of confidence that this is destroying whatever credibility the Western elites may have had in the non-Western world. That certainly should be happening. Then again, maybe a lot of people in the non-Western world aren't surprised by this at all, because they came to the conclusion a long time ago that these are truly sick, deranged human beings who are running the show over here. I don't know. All I can say about this is that if we had any credibility left in the non-Western world, this will surely put it out of its misery.
I don't see that a majority of Russian people are looking at this and thinking about it. It's certainly in my circle of friends. There's nobody talking about it. But at the highest levels, as I mentioned, President Putin and Sergei Lavrov have made it clear that this is what's going on, and it's to be condemned. Now, Russia is primarily a Christian country. Orthodoxy is, the main religion. Islam is huge here in different parts of Russia. Judaism, Protestantism, Roman Catholicism. But Orthodoxy is the largest religion, and it's had an important role to play over the last 1,000 years in the history and culture of this country. But when I look at China, China is definitely not a Christian country, but they're a country that obviously has some very basic, traditional human values. I don't want to get into that here with you now, but I just was questioning how people like the Chinese, the Russians, and the non-Western world are viewing what's going on. And I have to say, at least at the highest levels of those governments, they know what's going on. And I think they can see what's happening. I want to get back to Epstein and the network. In the United States, I think more and more people are beginning to realize the power that Israel has had over the United States Congress and the presidency. Through IPAC, through, billionaires and trillionaires maybe, who have completely bought our entire Congress, who bought many of the state legislatures and governors in the country. Is this at all part of that same network. I'm not saying, and I'm not implying that IPAC and Israel has used Jeffrey Epstein to corrupt other levels in our society, and certainly not in state government levels, individual states levels. But do you think that this pedophilia has also been used to control people, to compromise them, and to own them? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's likely to be the case. I mean, you see, there's plenty of evidence that Epstein recorded everything that went on in his mansions. So like in the photographs I've reviewed, you can see hidden cameras, including in bedrooms. The FBI found and they photographed drawers full of computer disks. They photographed rooms full of fancy electronic equipment, which I think was probably there to record the activities and to maintain records, video and audio recordings of what was going on throughout these large homes. And so if you're in possession of that kind of compromising material and, you are obsessed with enriching yourself as Jeffrey Epstein was, it's almost certainly the case that he was using compromising material to manipulate people into doing what he wanted them to do. And it's also clear that he was, by whatever mechanism, I don't know whether he was like on the payroll of the Mossad or, formerly an agent of some arm of the Israeli government, but it was very clear that he was on Israel's side and was at various points in his life trying to promote Israel's agenda. So if he has compromising material on powerful politicians like Bill Clinton, for example, and, his beloved Israeli regime wants Bill Clinton to do something that Clinton doesn't want to do, I think it's entirely possible that he was blackmailing Bill Clinton. And you see a lot of emails in the dump that's come out, which they read like blackmail threats. For example, one involving Bill Gates, an email that Epstein wrote to himself. It sounds very much like a blackmail threat. So if I were, if I were living in a country whose political leader, some members of the political elite in that country had a documented close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, I'd be going back and looking at all the decisions that were made by those politicians when they were in office that potentially impacted the interests of Israel, and see if there was something was done because of some threat of blackmail. But the potential for that is enormous here. There's lots of indications that that's what happened. We haven't seen the video evidence. We haven't seen a vast majority, I think, of the documentary evidence either. So we need to get to the bottom of this real fast. But I'm going to go back to what I said. I've said repeatedly. I still am of the view, Regis, that Israel is not running U.S. foreign policy. I think that the oligarchy, the U.S. oligarchy, and the Israeli political elite, that their agendas are aligned. What ultimately are they trying to achieve? They're trying to achieve U.S. domination of the region of West Asia because it is, it has the massive resources of easily accessible, high quality oil and gas, and because of its geostrategic location. It's the nexus between Africa, Asia, and Europe. And there are, extraordinarily important trade routes passing through this region. So they want to control it. The oligarchy does, and Israel is the means by which, one of the means by which they exercise domination over this region. Anybody gets out of hand, anybody says, we want to go our own way, we want to be free of the dictates of Washington, Washington sicks its rabid Israeli attack dog on that state or that group, whatever it may be, and uses the most brutal force to bring it to heel. So their agendas are aligned. So there may well have been isolated particular cases where the Israeli political elite felt they needed to use blackmail in order to achieve some certain outcome. And maybe they did that with senior American politicians. Entirely possible. But I still think that for the most part, the oligarchy would have continued to support Israel because Israel serves its own agenda.
You know, Dimitri, I can't help but wonder and really believe that Donald Trump is completely under the control of Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. There's been no American president that has been so outwardly, overtly supportive of everything Israel's doing. You've been reporting on this for a long time. And it's right out there. I mean, when Netanyahu comes 5 or 6 times to meet with Trump, when he gives speeches in the United States Congress and he gets multiple standing ovations, what the heck are Americans thinking? In my mind, I think they've got something really incredible on Donald Trump and many people that are in the United States Congress. Otherwise, I can't see how the United States is really not in charge. When now you mentioned foreign policy, but to me it looks like right now Donald Trump is under the complete control of Bibi Netanyahu. Let's finish on that thought.
Yeah, I think Trump is probably, of all the people who might have been blackmailed by Israel, I think that he's #1 candidate. No question about it. So, for example, even though Israel was clamoring, and many people in the neocon community in the United States were clamoring for war on Iran, nobody else was willing to go that far. Not Biden, not Obama, not even Bush, to actually wage war on Iran, because I think that they understood, not because they care about international law or human rights or the Iranian people, peace, whatever. They don't give a damn about any of that, because they realized that that was potentially going to do a lot of harm to their own economic interests. So, for example, if Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz and the price of oil goes through the roof, that could cause a major economic financial crisis in the United States. Financial institutions come tumbling down. It could be disastrous for powerful people in the oligarchy. I think that's a big part of the reason why, up until Trump came along, no president was willing to pull the trigger. They were willing to put sanctions on Iran. They were willing to engage in cyber warfare against Iran. They were willing to foment acts of terrorism in Iran, but they weren't willing to go to war. Trump is willing to go to war. He has gone to war against Iran. So he crossed that line. And so despite the risk that has for the oligarchy. So I think there are lots of indicia that Donald Trump is being blackmailed. Whether or not that's happening, I don't know. But man, he seems to be prepared to do whatever the Israeli government wants him to do.
Dimitri, I'm got scrolling across the bottom of the screen your Substack channel. I want to encourage everybody to subscribe, not only because we're talking about the topics we were talking about today, but Dimitri has come out of nowhere to now having tens of thousands of followers who are reading him and following him every day, sometimes multiple times a day, reports on everything that's happened in Central and South America, reports on what's going on in Canada, because he's Greek and he's got a residence in Greece and in Montreal. He's reporting on all of the important topics that you and I need to be aware of. I think I'm not patronizing now, Dimitri. I don't know that there's anybody out there in the blogosphere that is doing the work that you are doing, not only sitting from your chair in Montreal or in Greece, but as you jet set around the world and including to the Middle East. I want to encourage people to follow you. I think there's no better person, no better analyst to listen to today than Dimitri, and that includes myself.
It's very kind of you, Regis. Thank you very much for having me on and for the very generous comments. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you again